today I'm supposed to talk about Lincoln, a transformational leader. It's in the syllabus. We know how important that is because we're all education people, right? It is all important, the syllabus. Now, when we think about, most of the time when I ask folks about what do they know most about Lincoln, they always say, well, let me just ask you guys, what are some of the things, what are things that you think are most significant accomplishments of Lincoln as president? Given that prompt response, now I'm telling you that I teach undergraduates as well. So I can stand here, leading the country through the Civil War. Is that an accomplishment? To what end? Preserving the Union. That's one that most people say he saved the Union, right? That's good. Had to pursue the war, had to lead the country through the war. Did he lead the country through the war? Yeah. Did he lead the army? Sort of. Commander-in-chief, he must have. What's another one? There's one more that just jumps out at most people. Freeing the slaves, right. So, saving the Union would be one accomplishment, and freeing the slaves would be another. Now, those are two big things. And the question, of course, is if Lincoln is most remembered by those, and I don't know why this thing is not working out. I've got one frustration after another. Shoot. Okay, well, I've got a nice map here that y'all can't see. Yeah, please do. Display. I don't know. Here? Yep. There you go. All right. Well, now I want to go back one. There we go. See, now you get the whole big picture. Right. Now, let's go see if I can move this thing forward. So, this is a map of the 1860 election. Now, this is pretty interesting when you think about it, when we think about Lincoln doing these two big things, right? Let's say the American Civil War is really a revolution. We can say that, right? Changed the country. But look at this. Lincoln, the great American president. Most people would argue, and most historians arguably, but most of them put Lincoln at the top of the list of American presidents. But he's the only, he was elected president with the smallest percentage of the popular vote in American history, 39%. That's even less than Bill Clinton got, or W when he stole the election. No, I shouldn't say that. He didn't really. I mean, his brother did. Nevertheless, but the Electoral College, of course, made the difference. But look at how the South voted. The South voted not for Stephen Douglas, popular sovereignty candidate, but they voted for the secessionist candidate, Breckinridge. Breckinridge's idea was that if we can't have an amendment to guarantee the perpetuation of slavery, we will withdraw from the Union and create our own country. Now, to save the Union, why is that important? Why is saving the Union important? It poses the greatest constitutional crisis in American history. Now, the American Republic, the United Republic of America, the United States, is a republican system, and it's kind of like the mafia. Once you get in, you can't get out. So there had been a debate since the Articles of Confederation about how the republic, the federated republic, was going to exist. A federated republic. Now, that meant local governments, and each of these states during the Articles of Confederation, for example, in the Revolutionary War, each of these states believed they possessed sovereign rights, which they voluntarily surrendered to the Union. Now, the proponent of this concept, most articulate proponent of this concept, was John C. Calhoun. Now, if we voluntarily join the Union, why can't we voluntarily get out? Right? Well, Lincoln said, no, that's not what it was. In fact, his argument was you were never states anyway independent. You went from colonial status, a colony, directly to a state in a larger republic. So the debate had always been, who's got the power? Early on, American revolutionaries against Britain were convinced that any sort of government power was scary. Any central power had the right to encroach on local liberties and freedoms. We are free here, right? We don't like government. Does that sound familiar? We've got politicians now running who are absolutely convinced that anything that's government is evil. You cannot exist without government, but we got people who think you can. Running now. We got people now who want to attack the financial institutions of the country. Now, if you're going to tear down the financial institutions of the country, and the political system, you got anarchy. So we can't have that. So the constitutional crisis, Lincoln believed. Now, I got to tell you something else about Lincoln. This map tells us that Lincoln is going to exercise extraordinary transformational leadership style as president. Because look at what he's got to deal with. A divided country that's pretty soon, democracy breaks down, as we've talked before. Democracy breaks down completely when the minority is not willing to accept the rule of the majority, right? And the rule of the majority can lead to tyranny, right? The tyranny of the mob. The tyranny of the majority. So the minority has to submit. The majority has to be willing to protect the rights of the minority. Right. So Lincoln understood this. So for a militant and vocal minority, those beige states up there, for them to be able to retreat from the Union is to destroy democracy. And for Lincoln, it was to save the last best hope on earth. And for Lincoln, that meant Republican government and a more perfect union. Lincoln would retreat always to the ideology of the American Federal Republic, to the Declaration of Independence. Because when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, who was he writing the Declaration of Independence for? King George? Who did he write the Declaration of Independence for? King George already knew what was going on, right? The British already knew. The war was already underway. Started at Lexington and Concord, the Revolutionary War, right? So here we are. Looking back at why and to whom, is that the right way to say that? Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. It was for the American people. Because the American people needed to understand why they wanted to be independent. Why are we willing to make these sacrifices? And we're willing to do that, not just for independence, but for a representative Republican government. It's going to take us 10 years to get the Constitution really operational, because we've got to come out of the Articles of Confederation and all that. But one of the remarkable things about the Confederate States is they managed to get their Constitution and get operational in a hurry. They were ready to go by February of '61, just 4 months after the election. Isn't that remarkable? But they were able to create a government that functioned, at least in part. All right, we think here for a minute about how Lincoln got the job. At the time of the 1860 election, the country was, as you can see, profoundly and deeply divided. It was the issue of slavery and a variety of political and constitutional defenses of the peculiar institution that provided Lincoln an opportunity to be elected. Now, if Lincoln is going to defend the Constitution, he's got a problem with slavery, right? Lincoln is a pragmatic and at times ruthless politician. That's how he gets this job. How he gets the job as president. Well, one of the first challenges that confronts Lincoln, and this is where we begin to think in terms of transformational leadership, there are at least two major leadership theories that you all are going to be studying as you go forward in, I think, Dr. Berger's class. She's teaching leadership already. She's probably, and I'm going to not get into a lot of depth about these, but you understand what transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and how they are different from one another. And do you understand how they are similar? And Lincoln will practice both transactional and transformational leadership. I would argue that the successful transactional leader can only be effective if he has first been a transforming leader. Let's take the classic example of a transactional leadership. That's military, right? Colonel, I'm the general. Colonel, you take the hill. Colonel says, Major, you take the hill. Major says, Lieutenant, take the hill. First thing you know, it's down to somebody's got to take the hill. But every one of those people is responsible for taking an order and carrying it out, right? That's about transactional as you're going to get. Now, I would submit to you that if that transactional order is going to be understood, somewhere along the way that military mind has to be transformed into believing, one, in the cause, two, the reason we're taking the hill. Doesn't have to be explained to me again. I already got it. Right? I understand it. Therefore, you can tell me to take the hill and I'm going to do it because I know that I fit into the system. I have been transformed into the system. Transformational leadership first has to occur, in my view, at least, before we can have effective transactional leadership. So let's talk about Lincoln's transformational skills. First of all, after he's elected president, Lincoln has to bring a very divided Republican Party that elected him together. Now, it may appear to you, get my gadgets up there, it may appear to you that this is a pretty united group. Notice, this is something that's quite obvious to all of you, right? Is this a sectional division of the country? This is northeast, southwest, right? So it's sectional. So geographically they're divided. Are they divided in any other ways? Is the country divided except geographically? Somebody arbitrarily drew a map there. What divides it? Is it slavery? Not by looking at that. Why would you say that? And Tennessee's a slave state. And Kentucky's a slave state. Missouri's a slave state. By party? But really is slavery that divides the country. Now, the states you see, the upper South, they're not going to secede from the Union because they believe that slavery is, and they really, more or less, will go along with John Bell, the constitutional. He believes the Constitution, where it exists, should remain as it is where it exists. And slavery should remain protected by the Constitution where it exists. And John Bell, by the way, is from Tennessee. So these states that you see there, the border states, don't secede. They don't vote. They don't go out. They remain loyal to the Union in 1861 for a while. Now, the Constitution protects slavery, right? Does it? What does the Constitution say about slavery? You know, every self-respecting Tea Party candidate can draw the Constitution right out of his pocket like a gun. We're taking you back to the Constitution. I'll dare say that if you ask any of those people, except maybe Rand Paul, what the Constitution says about slavery, they won't be able to tell you all kinds of things. It doesn't say anything about it. It's silent. Why? Because the Constitution had to be ratified, right? And the drafters of the Constitution knew good and well that if you attack slavery, the southern states aren't going to do it. So it's already a sectional conflict back then. It's sectional, but it's all about slavery, the institution of slavery. Now, slavery translates into a larger debate, a debate over the Constitution, a debate over unified country, a United States. It's anything but united at this point, right? Anything but united. Lincoln's got to bring some sort of unity to the country, or he can't build a consensus from which to govern the country. He's got people in the party who are former, in the Republican Party, who are former know-nothings. The Americanist Party, they hate Catholics. They hate Jews. They hate everybody who's not a native-born white American male. Maybe they don't hate all women, but pretty close. So, that party's having trouble. Lincoln says that he doesn't agree with that. He's got an issue about citizenship as well that he has to deal with. But they're in this party. And in the same party are the German immigrants up there in Minnesota and Michigan who are Catholic. And the know-nothings hate the Catholics. They think if we're not careful, these Irishmen and German Catholics are going to start running the country and the Pope's going to tell us what to do. It's literally in their literature. So they're concerned about that. So they've got that group of anti-Catholics, know-nothings, in the same group with Irish and German immigrants. How's that going to work? And then you got abolitionists, and then you got Northern Democrats who believe anti-slavery, but they don't want to overturn slavery. They're not an abolitionist. They believe slavery can exist, and it has existed in a union for a long time. So why can't it continue? And it's protected by the Constitution. Well, all these people are in the same party. Lincoln's got to try to bring the abolitionists together with the anti-slavery folks. He's got to bring some hope of Biggs and certainly the border states back on board, stay in the Union. So he has to do this by, and remember, he was the dark horse. He was not the favorite candidate. Seward was the favorite candidate. He lost, and Seward's mad and bitter, and he's the leader of the Republican Party. He doesn't like Lincoln. He's mad at Lincoln. But Lincoln can't govern without him. How are we going to get him? Let's take a look then. A working definition of leadership, as we talked earlier, by James McGregor Burns. I define leadership as leaders inducing followers to act for certain goals that represent the values and motivations, the wants and needs, the aspirations and expectations of both leaders and followers. This is transformational leaders. Now let's take a look at what I've just described to you, this sort of mixture of all kinds of ideological positions, economic differences, political differences, how to address all of these things, whether or not we're going to have a federal republic and how that's going to operate. And if Lincoln is going to be a transforming leader, he has to accomplish the motivations, values and motivations, the wants and needs, and aspirations and expectations of both the leaders and the followers. Now, the leaders aren't even all on board on the same page with him, right? Now, one of the things he's going to have to do is he's going to have to get this guy, this storekeeper, who will eventually become the commander of the Union armies during the war, and the only one who seems to be able to win the war. Does Lincoln need to transform this guy? Absolutely. Because he is broke, a drunk, sort of mustered out of the army after the Mexican War, where he was quite an effective soldier. But now he's working in his father-in-law's store out in southern Illinois. And he's a Democrat. Anything but what Lincoln expected. Now, we'll talk more about Grant. And by the way, if y'all don't know who that is, that's who that is. Let's take a look at the three guys who wanted to be president. And none of them make the cut. Instead, the Republican Party picks Lincoln. Bates, a Midwesterner, former family from the Maryland coast, moved west to Missouri, brilliant jurist, senior jurist, and he is an elder statesman of the Republican Party, to say the least. And Seward is the acknowledged leader of the Republican Party, but he is really down on Lincoln. And then Chase is the governor of Ohio. And Chase is an avid abolitionist. Now, let's think about these three guys. Seward is a heavy drinker, enjoys drinking, smoking cigars, and is a political animal. Bates, a brilliant jurist, laid-back family man, bunch of grandchildren, bunch of children. Chase, very fastidious, never leaves home without his tie and his coat and his vest. But he disagrees strongly with Lincoln over the issue of slavery. Lincoln is, at this point, we're going to see the pragmatic Lincoln, and we're also going to see the ruthless Lincoln. How does he beat at the convention? How does he go about getting the nomination? We talked about this before. How does he get the nomination away from Seward? His operatives promise everything to the delegates. Now, as we begin to think about an open convention for this particular summer, in both parties maybe we ought to think about what that means. These delegates can vote for whoever they want to after the first ballot, right? And somebody's going to go around and say, now, you're in the Ohio delegation. Instead, Chase is not going to win. He's your favorite son. But let's promise Ohio something that they can get back. Let's make Chase a cabinet member. Okay, vote for Lincoln. How about Secretary of State? Okay, we'll take that. Now he's going to go over to Pennsylvania, and they're going to make the same promise to Cameron. Then they're going to come back and make Bates. You know, you will have the highest place in the cabinet. What would you like? He said, Secretary of State. He said, good. You got it. Now, Lincoln says, I don't know anything about this. I'm in Springfield. I'm not having anything to do with this. And I don't know what my operatives up there are doing. So, how ruthless is Lincoln going to be? First of all these guys disagree with him on most things, but they all support him for president. Some with more energy and enthusiasm than others, but all with the expectation that if he's elected, they're going to be in a strong place. Now, Seward especially supports Lincoln. They all do, but Seward especially, campaigns for him. So Lincoln's elected. Now, this is the cabinet that ultimately comes up. Let's take them. Let's say, here's Seward. First of all, he approaches Seward and says, he's the first person Lincoln approaches, Seward. By the way, this is the painting of the first reading of the Emancipation Proclamation. And before I tell you about Seward, this is kind of interesting to me. You notice here, on the right-hand side are the conservatives, all on the right-hand side of Lincoln. Bates, extremely conservative, very legalistic. Smith, Postmaster General. Blair, that's an old slave-holding aristocratic family from Maryland. Very powerful. You all seen the movie Lincoln? Well, you saw the Blair family in action, right? The old man sitting up there with his cane. It was that Art, I can't think of his name right now. Come to me in a minute. But he's the one who had the sons in the war, and so that's Blair, very conservative. The leader of the conservative wing of the Republican Party is Blair. Got to get him on board. So he's on the right side of Lincoln. On the left side are the liberals of the party, the left wing, if you will, of the party. Chase, abolitionist. Stanton, an abolitionist. Pennsylvania. And the most liberal of them all, Lincoln's already fired. And that's Cameron. And Cameron's picture is on the wall up there, over on the left-hand side, because Cameron is the first one ever Secretary of War, the first one ever to advocate African Americans in the military. He's a real liberal. He's so liberal they can't even get him off. They had to put him on the wall. Now, Cameron is able, as a political animal, to deliver to Lincoln. And he, Pennsylvania delegation, is promised a post for him in the cabinet. Cameron is a crook. Everybody knows it. In fact, Lincoln says of him that the only thing he will not steal is a red-hot stove. Cameron is going to almost immediately be charged by the president to supply the army. And he is going to go out and enter into contracts to buy military supplies and support. Instead of going through proper channels, he just goes out and buys stuff from his cronies. And the weapons come apart in the field. The boots that he buys for them fall apart as soon as they get wet. The food that he sends to them is rotten. They can't eat it. They get sick. The troops do. But his friends, his cronies are getting rich off government contracts. When all this comes to light, Lincoln's going to fire him. Well, Cameron is taken aback. He runs over, this is in 61, he runs over to see Chase and Chase and Seward, and it pleads with him, what's wrong with the president? Why is he firing me? I've done what he asked. Can't help it if the supplies weren't what they should have been. And then and he literally cries. He's so taken aback. And so they go over to see Lincoln. And Seward goes to see Lincoln. Says, poor old Cameron. And so Lincoln says, okay. So he writes another letter to Cameron. Much nicer. Tells him to resign. Second letter writes, and because you have the country at heart, you have long served the country and the public good, have an opening, you would be interested to be the minister to Russia. So they sent him to St. Peter. Stay very long because he says it's too cold. But anyway, so sort of Lincoln ended up exiling Cameron. But later on, Congress, the Committee on Contracts, is going to bring Cameron on. Write the letter. Support and the Pennsylvania delegation. Still a powerful political figure in Pennsylvania. He can go home, make peace, serve the country well. Secretary of Defense, now gone as Minister of Russia. He's back. Believing in Abraham Lincoln and whatever Lincoln wants to do, I can rally the Pennsylvania folk behind him. Is Lincoln practicing politics on a bridge? Why antagonize the guy? I'm going to fire him. He's going to be out of the office, out of the job. I used to, when I was in the insurance business, that was one of the things, We had to let somebody go. The best thing we could do, figure out, I'd get on the phone and start to the bank. Spot over there for old Susie. More likely, I had a bunch of brokers coming in and out of there, and if Susie was single, we had all kinds of problems, and if she wasn't single, we had double problems. I had to find a place for Susie all the time. There's always something going on. You had to find a place for these. Don't want to burn the bridges. Let them out. Seward says, I don't want the job as Secretary of State. Lincoln says, have you? I'm sorry, I'm not going to take the job. I'm not going to serve in the cabinet. Well, Lincoln then contacts probably the real political animal in New York, the power behind the throne, Thurlow Weed, who has been managing Seward's political campaigns for years. And he says, come out, I'll meet you in Chicago. Come out, let's talk. Weed goes out and talks, and then they convince. And Lincoln allows Thurlow Weed to go back and tell that he will be really the power behind the throne. Lincoln doesn't know much. It's just a know really what's going on. You will be Secretary of State. You will be the puppeteer. You will be pulling a Dick Cheney. You will be directing things behind the scene, as Cheney did for W. Well, Seward says, sounds pretty good. Now, between the 11th of November and during that time, Seward is a senator in Washington. Seward begins to maneuver around and do a bunch of stuff. Arrangements with secessionist operatives. And Lincoln allows him to and then when Lincoln arrives, Seward meets him at the train station, and he's giving him the picture. Well, by this time, we're approaching Sumter, crisis at Fort Sumter. Secession is already well underway, and Seward has promised Southern representatives that Lincoln, when he's president, will evacuate troops from fortifications at Fort Pulaski and Fort Sumter and negotiate for their return to the Union. Well, Lincoln not going to do that. So there's a confrontation right away. And Seward writes what I call the April Fool's letter. And we looked at that letter in here. On April the 1st, Seward writes a letter. President. I call it the April Fool. And in that letter, Seward says to him, you've been in office for a month now, and there's no policy evident to me or to anyone else. I'm paraphrasing here. You have no policy, and in order to lead the country, we have to have a policy, and someone has to develop a policy. And if it evolves on not going to be you, evolves on me, I do not seek the responsibility, but if no one else will take it, suggesting that the president's not going to take it, right? I will take it. Secretary of State. Lincoln immediately responds, writes a letter to Seward, never sends it, put it in a drawer, referring to meet, and years, decades later, that letter surfaces, but certainly didn't at the time. Meets with Seward and tells him what's in that letter. The letter says, and obviously Lincoln told him, I'm the president. We got a policy. As a matter of fact, we have a policy because I delivered my policy statement in my first inaugural. Ask you to help me write it. You read my address. You subscribed to the policy. In fact, you even suggested changes in the text, which I accepted. So we have a policy. I've already stated it. Now, you're exactly right, Seward. We do have to have a policy, and somebody's got to lead. And that's going to be me. I'm the president. I will do it. And within a month, Seward is going to respond after questioning the president like in the most arrogant, insubordinate kind of way. Here, Lincoln is practicing transformational leadership. He gets it done. And within a month, Seward is going to say, the president is the best of us all. How's that from being a guy who can't do anything, can't make policy a country bumpkin, to being the best of us all? In a month, Seward will become Lincoln's most competent, question marks, and certainly most devoted advisor. But a presidential ambitious person was Seward. And Bates, we've already talked about. The other person that was a prominent candidate for the president was Chase. Chase's ambitions to become president are not going to let up. He's going to backstab the president throughout. But Chase had one talent desperately needed. He could manage. Chase becomes the Secretary of the Treasury. So when Lincoln gets ready to give Cameron the authority to negotiate with those suppliers for the Army, he tells Chase to give him the money. Chase says, wait a minute, Mr. President, I have no authorization from the House of Representatives to do that. I can't until I have an appropriation. You know, the House of Representatives authorizes expenditures. And I've got no appropriation legislation. I can't just spend that money. Lincoln says, I'm the president, and you will spend it. Because the troops got to eat, and they got to get here, and they got to be supplied and armed, equipped. So Chase does it. And then, what happened? So representatives all over Chase and says he's violated. They're going to bring him up on charges. And Lincoln goes over there and calms them down. Then Chase said, I'm the responsible person. I'm the one who directed him. It was on my orders, Commander-in-Chief, under my emergency war powers that I authorized these expenditures. Now Chase is, I'm in good shape. But by the way, he shouldn't have done that. I should have been president. If I'd been president, it wouldn't happen like this. Starts all this backstabbing. What's Lincoln going to ultimately do with Chase? In 1863, he's got to have Chase because he's fixing to run again for president, right? In 64, so he needs Chase's support. Chase doesn't want to support him. So what he does is he says, now, Brother Chase, tell you what I'll do. How would you like, you know what happened? Chief Justice he says, lifetime appointment, Supreme Court, sounds good. You'll be a good president. Pats him on the back, Lincoln promotes him, gets him right out, gets rid of him. Almost as effective as sending Cameron to Russia. Now, what he's doing is practicing pragmatic and ruthless politics at the same time, right? Could get into how Chase really negotiates, creates a cabinet crisis that threatens to have the president impeached, and all this time in the back of his mind, going back to Kent. Time in the back of Lincoln's mind is the possibility I can't put a military person like Grant in there as Secretary of Defense, can I? Because what does that smack of? First thing you know, we're going to lose civilian control of the military, and we can't have that in the United States, right? So can't have that. Now, we got rid of Chase, we got rid of Cameron, right, for all the reasons I told you. Now, one of the things that Lincoln's going to do is he's going to say to Seward and Chase, he says, we've got to replace Cameron. He already knows who he's going to take. He wants Edwin Stanton from Pennsylvania, right? So he says to Seward, Cameron recommend Stanton for the job? Now, all three men will go to the president and say, we recommend Stanton. He says, I think that's probably a good choice. Now, who made the choice? Is that good politics? Can you imagine Obama like that? Close. Now, that may sound like a criticism of Obama, and it is, because it's, in my view, a conspicuous absence of leadership. But what can you do when you got the obstructionist on the other side, Dr. No, who's never agreed to anything? I'll let y'all guess who that is. Now, I have to be careful to talk about folks because use your position for their political. But I'm equally critical of all of them. I'm pretty even with it. But about Stanton a minute. Previously, he was a Democrat, and he was in the Buchanan administration. He was Secretary of War for Buchanan. And while he was in the Buchanan's president during the secession crisis, he funneled information. Maybe we ought to shut that door. What do you think? Those people don't need to hear me. Thank you. What's that? They're not supposed to be in here, I don't think. They've got other classes. Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's what they're doing, sitting out there and all this. Sound like it. Sound like some of the undergraduates that I got. Now, tell y'all, it's probably, our all-star back. I don't know how the second half is going to be, but it's got to be at least that much better. All right, we will not enjoy the benefit of his brains and skill at the basketball court next year if he doesn't shape up a little bit. But anyway, so much for that. Y'all don't tell anybody. Well, it's on the tape. Okay, moving right along. Stanton is an interesting story for Lincoln. Stanton had funneled information from his inside position in the Buchanan administration to Seward during the secession crisis. Seward liked him, and he was a loyal Unionist, although a Democrat. But he had tried a case 4 years earlier in Cincinnati, Ohio. Stanton was a member of a large, extraordinarily successful, prominent Philadelphia law firm. Well, this case was known as the McCormick Reaper case. It was a patent case. And the McCormicks claimed that their new reaping machine patent was infringed. So they hired a firm and sent them. Well, then they got to thinking, wait a minute, this is an Illinois case. We need an Illinois attorney. So they associated the best attorney, corporate attorney, in the state with Stanton. Stanton said, I'm not worth that buffoon. Called him a gorilla. So refused to send copies of the depositions or any of the briefs or anything to Lincoln. Lincoln went about the investigation, wrote a brief, sent it to Stanton. Stanton asked for a change of venue to get it out of Illinois, moved to Cincinnati, Ohio case. So they all show up for the trial, right? Courtroom's packed. The first motion and introduces to the court is that only one attorney should present at the counsel's desk. Banishing Lincoln to the balcony, the gallery where he sat spectating. Humiliated Lincoln, of course. Now, Stanton then loses the case. Lincoln doesn't have anything, doesn't say you should listen. Later on, years later, Stanton's going to say, if I had read Lincoln's brief, we might have won the case. I read it, gave him any credit. Lincoln wants to make him a key person in his cabinet. Secretary of War during the Civil War. That's pretty important. Is he going to take Stanton? Not my time up. My time up. What time am I supposed to be through? It's 5. It is 5. Okay, sorry about that. I do this every time, don't I? Okay. Now, we think about it. Here he is, Lincoln. Stanton was 24/7. He didn't like anybody. Nobody liked him. Got the job. And like Lincoln, calls him a gorilla, an ignorant buffoon, all this stuff. Analysis. Stanton, who is the most devoted of all Lincoln's cabinet members, even Seward, ain't come close to the devotion that Stanton has for Lincoln, despite all this. Stanton's son dies. Well, Lincoln is the first one over there and rides with Stanton in the carriage during the funeral home. And Stanton never forgets it. And when Lincoln lies dying that night, it's Stanton who holds his feet. There's a famous quote, now belongs to the ages. Stanton. How in the world make this slight? Transform Stanton. Adversary to an adversary. Forming leadership. Pragmatic, political. And then the right guy, the right job. Not right. You're going to get rid of him. Send him to Russia. Take him on the Supreme Court. Going to find something to do. Good ones. Going to reward. Going to believe in us. And they do. Transformational leadership style. Lincoln, the transformational leader. Best examples are in his cabinet. And we could go through the rest of them. We could go through Gideon Welles. We could go through them all. They all have similar stories. Secretary is good and bad. Dash Cameron. He even looks like a weasel thief, doesn't he? And I was going to talk about slavery, but we can't talk about the practical politician and how he approaches slavery. We'll talk about that some other time.